Welcome to Down the Line TV, Jana Firestone. We're really excited to talk to you today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Jana. We've been so excited to talk to you. Like I said off camera, I've actually feel like I've known you for years. So, no, thank you for joining us.
We connected the dots today. For those of you that don't know Jana, she's a very experienced therapist. She's currently holding a position at a very prominent Melbourne high school. She's worked with all sorts of people in all sorts of areas. We're really excited to learn from Jana today about things that we can do to help our athletes that are that 10 to 15 years of age with female athletes. Jana, it's quite an interesting age for girls. There's lots of things thrown at them. Let's start with, what are some of the things that girls are going through during those years?
Well, those are the tricky years because that's when we're starting to go through puberty. Our bodies are starting to change. And obviously for some girls that happens earlier and some later. And that's when we start to become a little bit more self-conscious and self-aware. So we start comparing ourselves to other people and thinking about how we look and thinking about our bodies in a different way. And the other thing is that girls are now exposed, as we know, so much more to images of women that they were never exposed to before. So through social media, but even mainstream media, the focus is always on women's bodies, how they look, how much weight they've lost, how much weight they've put on. You know, I mean, even just in the last week, I think there are like 100 articles about Rebel Wilson's amazing weight loss. I don't think she's had 100 articles about her achievements in her life.
Well, you know, I would have written 100 articles around her because I'm #1 ticket holder at her fan club, but go on.
We know that. But, you know, we don't see the Daily Mail writing up 100 articles on Roger Federer's body this week and how much he scoffed down at lunch at a catch-up with an unknown friend. I mean, it's ridiculous, the amount of focus that is placed on women's bodies. It's also the conversations that we're having about our bodies, whether we're aware of it or not. So parents talking about how they look and how they feel in their own bodies, it has a big impact on how young women start to think and feel about their own bodies. You know, even you might think as a parent, you're doing the right thing, like, oh, you sure you should be having a second one of those? Or, but all of those little messages really start to kick into high gear in those kind of pre-teen, early teen years. And that's the stuff we've got to be really careful of.
It's a really interesting point you make, because I don't think, you know, I'm being in my parents' shoes at the moment, and you don't really realise how much of an impact those little things that you say have an impact on your kids, and especially an athlete who, you know, is dedicated to a full-time schedule, and especially females that see their bodies change and look at themselves as negative. But Stoney, you know, a young boy building muscle, getting bigger, you know, they're seen as absolute hero material.
Yeah, heroes, positive.
Yeah. And it's just a really difficult conversation to navigate for not only female coaches, but especially male coaches working with a female athlete. How do we go about those conversations? So for any coaches having to deal with this topic or an athlete dealing with body image issues, what is the first step in having those conversations? What does it look like?
Well, I guess the first thing to do is to acknowledge the role of puberty. I mean, it's totally awkward. No one likes having those conversations about what's happening and how our bodies are changing. That's why they write those really daggy books that we all probably remember from when we were growing up. But it's really, yeah, where did I come from? What's happening to me? You know, they were, you know, the hot ticket item in the school library. But it's really important just to acknowledge what is happening. And so to talk with girls and say, listen, what's happening is your body's doing exactly what it needs to be doing right now.
Yeah.
So when you're going through puberty, you're going to put on a little bit of weight. That fat that's going on is actually protecting your body. It's storing up the things that your body needs to function. Yeah. And you might look a little bit different than you did before. It might feel a little bit strange. You know, we're going to go through peaks and troughs. You're going to feel really good and then not feel so great. And that's all part of it. It's all about change and development and growth. And it's all doing what it's supposed to be doing. So the minute you start shaming kids about how they look and the changes that are happening to them, that's where the damage is going to happen. Yeah. So I guess the first step is normalizing what's happening for them.
So let's stay with the shaming for a minute, because that is what it is.
Mm.
There's been time and time again, we've heard this same story from different coaches doing this to different athletes. So that's why I want to use it as an example. Coaches mandating that a young 15 to 16-year-old female is at a certain weight to be able to compete. And should they not reach that, I don't know what you would call it, magical number, which is created because there isn't a weight class in tennis, they've been forbidden from competing. And what does that do to them mentally? A 15 to 16-year-old girl say, you can't play until you get to a certain weight.
I mean, that is shocking to hear, especially in a sport where there is no weight class. It's bad enough in sports like, you know, horse racing, where we know jockeys have to be a certain weight because of they're on an animal. I mean, surely you would think with tennis, the stronger you are and the more power you have, the better. I mean, I don't know why that's not the focus. Like, that blows my mind a little bit. So I don't know, it's something about the culture that needs to change. You know,
but what does it do to them mentally? What's that message?
Well, it's damaging big time. I mean, the thing with body image with young people, and it's not even just young girls, it is young boys too. The more negative thoughts they start to have about themselves and the shame that they start to feel from people they trust and respect, that is going to do more damage to them than you can even imagine. So it's a slippery slope. You start to think, okay, well, this person that I really respect and look up to is telling me there's something wrong with me, then there must be something wrong with me. If I'm not allowed to compete in the sport that I've been training for my whole life because of how much I weigh, then there's something wrong with me. It's not the sport, there's something wrong with me. And then once they start thinking and believing that, then it's a very, very dangerous slope into disordered eating and thinking.
Yeah. And I guess, Jana, is 10 to 15, sure, that's challenging enough. What's that next level look like? So we're talking 15 all the way to even 20, is body takes completely different shape. The pressures become a little higher. You know, the stakes are higher. There's more parent involvement. There's more people, more stakeholders. It's just, again, just a pressure cooker. Yeah. I want to talk more about that age group because they're the sort of times where they become a little recluse. You think on the outside everything is going great, but actually they're really lonely inside. And a lot of the time in sport, you know, you're traveling, especially in tennis, you're traveling on your own. You don't have a lot of close people to talk to. What's the strategy there? Because a lot of the time you'll see girls will say, oh, I don't feel comfortable talking to that coach.
Yeah.
And it becomes a really awkward conversation. A year goes down the track and you haven't had a proper conversation yet, and that plays in a really dark place. How do we navigate that, especially with that age group?
Absolutely. I think you nailed it when you said then there needs to be a conversation. So the number one thing that we as therapists obviously recommend is talking to someone, and that doesn't always mean it has to be a therapist or you know, any kind of mental health practitioner. It's just about finding a trusted adult in their life that they can talk to, and it's got to be, it sort of can't get brushed under the rug. You know, these things have to be addressed head on. Have the awkward conversations. If you notice that the player is becoming withdrawn or isolated, there's mood changes, they're not themselves, that is every kind of red flag that you need to step in. And it's not even that, again, you have to have the answers about, you know, what to do and how to fix them, but it's more just about giving them a safe space to talk about how they're feeling, what's going on, why are they so lonely, why is this so hard? You know, especially I imagine that the players that are starting to really hit their strides and make some gains and start to see some professional wins, it probably gets more lonely and more difficult the higher up you go.
Yeah.
So it's even more important at that stage to be fostering a culture of conversation.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know, can they be buddied up with people? Can you kind of, I mean, even like in school, kind of put kids together, put players together in groups, almost make them have conversations, give them a space to debrief about what's going on and how hard it is for them.
Well, Stoney, just on that, on that though, is the skills for coaches, that is the hardest part. Is some are really great communicators with this, aren't they? And then there's some that just aren't, and almost feel awkward having that conversation. It's being able to create, I think, a system where coaches are upskilled with this ability to sit down and read the signs. I think a lot of the time they're not reading signs.
No, they're not.
They could be there for 6 months and there's not even a single person that's going up and saying, hey, are you okay? You don't seem yourself. It's almost like seen as, well, you work hard, you do this, you come back, you be resilient the next day, and you push forward. And I think we see that a lot in other sports, not only tennis. So they're the sort of things I would like to see coaches start to implement, is just a greater level of knowledge and reading the signs a bit earlier before you allow this to kind of funnel into a really dark place.
What are those signs, Jans, when people are starting to go a little bit south? If we could pick up on it early, then we'll get ahead of the game. What can coaches be looking for?
So the most obvious ones are sort of what I touched on before. When you start to see somebody starting to isolate a little bit, they're not going out socially. They're not maybe catching up with people as often, or I know it's hard when you're on the road with tennis, but you just start to see their social behaviours changing. You might also see they just become a bit more withdrawn generally, and they're not wanting to talk much or engage much in anything outside of what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And then you might see mood changes. You might see really extreme ones or really subtle ones. You might just see they lost the spark a little bit, or they're really aggressive, or they're really defensive, or you just can see they're not coping as well as they might have before. Yeah. So those would be the main ones to be looking out for.
And then to ask something along the lines of, are you okay? What can you do beyond asking that?
Well, to ask that question, a lot of people are afraid to even ask that question because they're scared of what the answer is going to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is really scary. But, there's a whole day of celebration called Are You Okay Day, because that is as simple as it gets. That's all you have to ask, like, are you okay? And you got to keep asking it, because they're not going to give you everything the first time you ask. And then the second part is just don't be afraid of the answer. Whatever their answer is, your job is only to listen. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to be the person that says, this is what you need to do. That's not your role. You're just there to listen. And then if it's really scary and it feels like they really need some mental health support, it's quite easy from there. You refer them on to the people that know what they're doing. Yeah. So send them to the GP. I'm sure there are doctors working within the teams or psychologists that they can refer to. So it doesn't have to be you dealing with it on your own. Just get the information, let the person know that it's safe for them to share how they're feeling. Because the worst part of any mental health issue, the way that things spiral really quickly, is when you're not talking about it, no matter what it is, eating, any kind of mental health stuff. You've got to talk about it, or it gets much bigger and much worse more quickly.
What do you do with an athlete who may be, for example, I don't like to use the word so far down the track, but they've been dealing with this for a while. Their perception of their body is so warped, and what you're seeing, what they're seeing is two very different things. What does the rewiring process look like for that athlete? I know it could be a very long journey, but what is a really, simple, what are a couple of strategies that maybe you could run us through that could be the beginning of a transformation?
Well, if you're in that role of wanting to support them, first of all, unfortunately, they're going to have to buy into it. So they've got to recognise that it's a problem. So you've got to help them to understand that it's a problem. And it doesn't have to be, again, a really scary conversation. It can be, listen, I'm a bit concerned about what's going on here in terms of you're not eating enough or whatever it is. And then just bringing it right back to the foundations. What is it? We need good food and nutrition for muscle tone, for strength, for power. You're in a game that is all about that skill, power, strength. And if you're not eating enough and you're not eating enough of the right foods, you're not going to be able to play. Yeah. So you have to make a decision. What's more important here? How you're feeling about your body and that negative spiral that you're in, or the game. And if the focus is the game, you know, you've got a little hook then. If they're really committed to their tennis, that's your hook.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well, for you to succeed in this sport, we need to get on top of this. So let's meet with a dietitian. Let's get a plan going. I'm not saying let's go crazy and you've got to eat 4 bowls of pasta 3 times a day. Let's do this properly. Let's do it slowly, and let's do it together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the buy-in, isn't it? It's also the buy-in of that athlete. It's not just the coach. It's getting all on board and committing to it, I guess, over a long period of time. It's a tough project for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's having the right things to say, because people do feel a little bit nervous about what the answer might be when they raise certain things or they try to talk about things that are important. One thing, Jana, is that there are athletes out there that have sort of disordered eating or those sort of patterns. And when coaches are aware of that, they know all about the athlete. How detrimental is it to talk about their weight and body image in front of that person in any sort of capacity, meaning more negatively?
Oh, totally detrimental.
And what could be the repercussions of that?
Well, if you've got someone that's already got some body image issues or disordered eating or thinking, and then you're really reinforcing that behavior by saying you are too heavy or you're eating too much or you're eating the wrong foods, you know, that's just completely adding to the problem.
Yeah.
So not only are you reinforcing their negative thinking, which in turn is, you know, telling them that they're doing the right thing.
That's kind of bizarre, but it is kind of true. I didn't think of it like that.
Yeah. Really interesting to think of it like that.
Yeah. So it's a really tricky one. If someone's doing it unintentionally, I mean, I guess the main point here is you've just got to be aware of it. I mean, why are any coaches talking negatively about players' bodies anyway? Why are we talking about weight unless it's really getting in the way of the game? If you've got a morbidly obese person, of course they're not going to play as well as someone who's really fit. But, you know, I imagine almost everybody that you're dealing with is already at a supreme level of fitness.
Yeah, I think it's changing the culture around, or just the language around athletes in general. Male, female, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's just really important to create a safe, healthy environment and not bring up the whole body thing, because I think you've got a very good understanding of where you're at, you know, where you may need to get to eventually, but when you're ready, you will make those jumps. I think sometimes we're trying to push these athletes to be maybe 5 years down the track when actually they haven't really crossed over that first hurdle. And I think it's just where they're at in the maturity level and understanding. And half the time they don't really know anything about themselves yet, and they're still discovering what foods they like, what they don't like. They travel overseas. You may put on weight because all of a sudden you're eating, you know, Stoney, you and I can probably relate to this. When we went away to Europe on our first trip, I mean, we were having croissants for breakfast, you know.
Oh, I ate everything I could find. What are you talking about?
You know what? It was fun.
I loved it.
Experiment different cultures and how they went about it. You know, no longer could I find my wheat bix or whatever, right? Any Aussie gem of Vegemite. But I guess the point is that these are the things that happen when you travel and when you don't have someone constantly looking over your shoulder. You are allowed to make decisions and make good decisions and bad decisions, and we need to allow athletes to feel okay about this.
Yeah, but the misunderstanding, Jana, is a biological thing, because the guys in our age group that would go across and eat 7 gelatos and 6 croissants a day, which is at least what I would want to do, we don't have this huge sudden uptake of testosterone that just burns through everything. And so they do the same things, yet girls will put on the weight because, like, physiologically, that's what happens, right, Jana?
Yeah, 100%, and it's totally unfair. I mean, you know, we have different hormones. It's just a fact of life. So, you know, that's, I guess, part of the conversation when you're working with young girls is just explaining the function of the body again. So it's like, well, you know, yeah, your mates might be able to eat all of that and then they burn it off much more quickly. Unfortunately, our bodies don't work the same way. So you can still enjoy everything, but it's all about moderation.
Yeah.
And I think always just bringing it back to the functionality of the body. I mean, your entire profession is based on your body working correctly and training the body to work in a certain way. And food is a natural part of that. You know, you need to fuel the body to make it work the way that you want it to. So I guess that's just, another conversation you need to have from the beginning.
Now, can I just ask you, one thing that's on my mind is the role modelling role. So you're travelling with athletes, you know, you happen to sneak in a quick little cinnamon bun here and there, and an athlete catches you and is like, well, if you can do it, I can do it. I mean, how much does that play into it with role modelling?
Well, I guess again, it's like even as a parent, you know, you want to be realistic. You can't pretend to your children that you never eat sugar. I mean, unless you're one of those very weird people that can really do that. But you want to be real about it. So, you know, if they catch you having a little sneaky something, you know, maybe that's part of the conversation. You say, well, you know what? I went for a run this morning and I know that tomorrow I've got a big session in the gym. So I just thought I'd have a little something. I'm not going crazy. Had a taste. It's delicious. I feel great. And I'm just going to work hard tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just keep it pretty simple and normalize it. People get crazy about this kind of conversation, but if you just be an authentic person and try to be empowering, I think it makes a huge difference. Which brings me to talk to you about something that's quite difficult for athletes is comparison. And comparison for girls, as we've been saying, is the body image on Instagram or on the front of Cosmopolitan or whatever it is that they're reading. What can we do as coaches rather than compare our athletes to try to drive a result? People use that to try and push them forward. Yeah. Talk to us about different strategies and why comparison can be pretty dangerous.
Well, just like for anyone, comparison is the worst motivator you can use, because you're never ever going to look like the person on Instagram that's used 400 filters and face-tuned everything to look as perfect and unrealistic as possible. It's just not going to happen. So the only way comparison can be useful is if you're comparing achievement and statistics and training methods. I think that's where it could be useful. But I think, you know, if you do see girls using a lot of social media as their go-to, which we all do, you know, maybe that's the time to have the conversation about, well, this isn't real. We know this isn't real. Like, let's do some kind of social media training perhaps about, look, this is all entertainment. It's not real. People put the best possible version of themselves. They don't show themselves sweating and looking disgusting and all of the things that are real in life. So you've got to keep it in perspective. And it's also, I think, if you're going to use images and if it has to be part of the picture, I would try and find people that are inspiring with really body positive messages. I mean, people like Serena, who's got such a strong, amazing body. She looks nothing like the girls on Instagram. You know, finding more women like that are celebrating bodies in a really positive way and using those as role models instead of, you know, the fluff.
Yeah, it was interesting, actually. I read an article. I won't name the player. It was at the US Open, and it was a male, actually, and they referred to his legs as model-like and his contracts that he's doing, and he's got these, you know, model legs, model arms. I'm thinking, what does that actually mean? You know, for any male or female reading that is the most ridiculous thing I could ever have read for a tennis player. Like, it was just so left field, and I thought, what relevance does this have to the amazing achievement that's just been had? So it's funny. It happens in, you know, both genders, but obviously the females, we probably hear about it more.
Yeah, and it's a testament to what sells in mainstream media. It's all about the surface. It's again going back to that Rebel Wilson conversation. It's you know, so often all we see is how somebody looks and how much of the weight they've lost, how much weight they've put on, what they're wearing. You know, why that's the conversation and not the achievement right up front just blows my mind.
As a collective, we have to make a change, and it just takes each one of us and anyone that is watching this show just to step up and be different and not just fall into that same thing of promoting someone that looks like this or the clickbait and things like that. We have to start to get real with our conversations, and that's what we're trying to do, Boo, and change the way that people are communicating and working with female athletes. Another thing, back to comparison, Jana, is talking about male players when you're trying to work with a female player. So they'll say, well, men hit their forehand better, men are faster, they've got better serves. That's not empowering language working with female athletes. Can you talk a little bit as to why it's not and how it's better to communicate with them?
Well, again, that's just an unattainable comparison. Men and women are different. We have different bodies, we have different abilities. One's not better than the other, it's just different. So it's like comparing apples and oranges. Why would you be, I mean, it's just not, it's not fair to the player. So I don't know, it's shaming them in a way about something they can't change. Their body is built differently. Our hormones are different. Our strengths and weaknesses are different across both genders. So it's just, it's just really unhelpful. And I think, you know, if the focus can be on the player in front of them, then you're going to get a better result all round.
For sure. And, you know, whichever athlete you're working with whatever sport, you want to be talking about, you know, where to from here, setting goals, keeping in the present, not worrying about, you know, your weight, what you're going to eat after you get off. Want to be in the present as much as possible. But overall, Stoney, we want to have happy athletes, don't we? We want them to be looking forward to coming to do what they do on a day-to-day basis and not feeling like they're in this dark place. And I think this conversation is just awesome, and I'm really glad we're having it, and we're having it with a great professional that can hopefully create some strategies for our coaches and athletes.
Yes, she's very bright. It's quite interesting because I was thinking about so many issues that I wanted to talk to Jana about, and what you're saying about that happiness. You two have known me since I was 12. I was pretty out there, and I felt like a lot of the time, Jana, coaches just really didn't understand me, and I asked a lot of questions, and I was always put really in that, yeah, she's fun, she's a good kid, but she's difficult, and she just doesn't fit what makes it easy for the coach. How can coaches navigate personalities that don't make their job as easy and as mindless as they would just love to show up and just brainlessly do what they're doing?
Well, the word that comes to mind is coachable. You know, that gets thrown around in a lot of industries. Are they coachable? Which I think is totally an obsolete idea.
What is coachable?
Yeah. Exactly. And you hit on it before, Stoney, when you're saying, you know, every kid is different. Every athlete is different. And if you're going to be a successful coach, you've got to be able to adapt and change based on the personality and the needs of the person in front of you. So how boring would life be if you're doing the same thing every single day and not changing any of your strategies? You want to be agile as a thinker and as a trainer and as somebody that can come up with new strategies on the spot. So the only way to do that is to be listening and looking at what's in front of you. Like with you, Stoney, I mean, what would have worked? What the traditional kind of box cutter coaching wasn't working for you. Can you think of a time when a coach really kind of connected and what the difference was there?
Yeah, well, I felt like they cared about me. And I imagine that particularly working at a high school with all sorts of different kids going through different things, they might be going through stuff that we don't know about, and they present in a certain way, and they come to you because you're a person that can help them through these things. But even for you, when you have someone that it's really, really challenging for you and uncomfortable and difficult for you to work with, how do you do it? What do you do?
Well, you have to work with what's in front of you. You know, so you have to really listen. And that doesn't mean you're just kind of saying the same things. You've got to explore and investigate and work out what's really going on for this person. Yeah. What are they showing me and what are they telling me and what do they really mean?
Yeah.
And you're not going to get all of that in the first go. You've got to spend time with somebody kind of peeling back the layers and working out what drives them, what motivates them, what works, what doesn't. And sometimes you got to try a whole bunch of different things that don't work until you get to that one thing that really works. And I guess, you know, that's the same with coaching. You just try all the different strategies and see how they respond. Is this working? My God, they're a nightmare when we try and do things this way. You know, if I'm this kind of a coach, it's rubbing them the wrong way. If I'm this way, I got a better result. But it's also, I guess, like anything, it's about building the rapport. So if you haven't got the relationship and the rapport to begin with, if you've got someone that's a little bit challenging or difficult, they're not going to respect you. Like, respect is earned, and you earn that respect by making it clear that you're invested in them and the relationship and showing them that.
You send them out of your office in your work setting. Say someone's being extremely challenging, it's not going anywhere or how you thought it needed to go. I imagine that you can't send them out of your office. Maybe you do, but there's a lot of coaches that will send the player home, sit them on the bench, and I'm not exactly sure, other than that makes them feel shame for their behaviour, that they don't even know what they're doing. How, when you get that feeling of, you probably don't, but you're at the end point with them, how do you sit there and just keep moving through it?
Well, that's the key thing. You have to work through it. So I might have hit a brick wall with someone and, you know, they're just pushing back, and they don't want to move and hear what I'm saying. I'm making a suggestion. Could it be this? Like, is it possible that you're feeling like this because of this? What would happen if you try this? And they're just like brick walling me. Then you have to just take a different approach and say, all right, why don't we just shelve that for now? And, you know, I'm interested in what you said before about blah, 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 and move around it to something else. Because if you're hitting the brick walls, you're going to get nowhere. They don't want to go through that yet. So you've just got to find something else to do. So sending them off or sending them home, I don't really see how that's going to improve the relationship. If you can show them that you're willing to work through it together and say, all right, this isn't working, let's try something else. Let's have a bit of fun here. What could we do?
No, but it's true, right, Boo? The shelving, I like that.
It's your job as a coach to understand the athlete who is in front of you, and it's your job to coach them through life and tennis. And unfortunately, sometimes the life stuff, you know, they bring it to their on court. So it's trying to figure out who you're dealing with. And look, we're all guilty. I mean, I've at one point where I've absolutely done everything I can, and it got to an end point, and you know what, maybe let's just end the session here. We'll talk about it later. I haven't gone, well, see you later, I'm leaving. But you know what, I don't think this is working. I don't think you're getting much out of this. Let's end the session. And you try and follow up later. But it's understanding what's going on for that athlete.
I would really struggle if someone told me that we're just going to end the session here because it's not going well. I would really struggle with that, because I would feel like, even though that coach would think they were trying to help me, I would feel like I was being punished. Maybe rather than go, if they say, look, I just want to end the session, I'm feeling pretty bad, then and move on. But if they are still in it, but they're not listening, they're a brick wall, maybe it's like playing Foursquare or bounce or something until they come back. I think it's quite dangerous to end a session if you did that, Jana, at school and you're like, all right, we're done. How would that go down with the kid?
Well, you've ruptured the relationship then, haven't you? It can be hard to come back from. But the way you were describing it, Betty, you know, there's maybe there's a happy medium. If you notice, like, if they are bringing stuff from home or wherever and they're just in a bad headspace, you know, I think you're right that maybe a combination between what you've both said in terms of saying, well, listen, this isn't working at the moment. What else could we do? You know, or have that, like, should we go for a walk? Like, let's have a chat. How's it going? You know, let's forget this for today. Let's do something else.
And you know what? And for sure, that relationship, over time, you might not see it then and there, but over time, the trust is built because you've taken the time to actually accept them for where they're at and who they are. And, you know, it's not an easy thing because you come to work with your hat on, ready to go. You want to just work, you know, you want to get the best out of the session. But as we know, we could get 2 really good days in and the next 4 are a flop. So it's just being prepared that this is going to happen and you have to have strategies in place to deal with it. So bloody great conversation, ladies.
Yes, it's very good. She's very, the Curious Life podcast is named the Curious Life podcast because Jana truly is very curious. She's the best listener that I've ever known, next to actually her mum. Her mum was an amazing listener. I always tell her this, the two greatest listeners I've ever come across. Jana, tell us where people can listen to you and learn more things about navigating life and curious conversations.
Yeah, that's right. I host and produce a podcast called the Curious Life Podcast. That's available everywhere you get your poddies, on iTunes, Spotify, whatever apps on your phone. Or you can check out the website at thecuriouslife.net. And I'm on Instagram, of course, at the Curious Life Podcast.
I'll be following. I think I've already started following, so tuning in.
Did you sneaky like that during the session?
No, I didn't. I did last week though, but no, look, any friend of Stoney's is becoming a friend of mine clearly. So, no, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jans.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. Great chat.
Thank you.
Welcome to Down the Line TV, Nathan Martin. How are you doing today?
Couldn't be better, Sarah Stone.
Welcome, Nate. It's great to have you with us. We're going to hit you with a pretty hot topic right off the bat. Are you ready for this?
Yep.
Resilience. I know you're really passionate about this topic. You work with a lot of young kids at Tennis Fitness. Where are you at with this research behind resilience?
Good question, Betty. Well, look, the last couple of years, but Giselle and I have been tennis trainers for going on 20 years now. And, the actual training side of things, I think the more and more you do it, it gets easier and easier. So trying to find other areas that we can get better in and also look for personal growth ourselves. And, we consider, the physical side of tennis, the technical side of tennis. So what you do off court with your fitness training, etc., and strength and conditioning is one component. The on-court coaching and technical side of thing would be another component. And then we've got the mental and emotional component as well. And we consider those three components just as important as each other. So trying to educate parents and coaches and players in that space is really what we're trying to do now. Not, a lot of parents and coaches just think it's just hitting balls. Yeah, look, the resilient side of things, we find, logically speaking, if a player has the ability to be able to get knocked down and get back up again and know that it's okay. Because when you think about it, you're going to lose 50% of your matches that you play, possibly even more. So being good at losing is super important for a young tennis player. We don't want them to get comfortable with it, but we need them to be able to go, okay, I lost. What went wrong? What did I do well? How do I improve?
Yeah.
And you get back on court and you just deal with it. So, putting things in place for players, and I could talk about this for hours. There's a lot of different things that need to happen, and it's all dependent on the individual and their external factors as well, like their environment, their family situation, all the stresses in their life. But generally speaking, what we need to aim to do as coaches and educators is to get players challenging themselves and being comfortable with putting himself in a situation where, there's a massive chance I'm not going to do this, that I'm going to fail, but I'm going to try my best to do it. So we need that attitude, first of all, to be there. No matter what they think the outcome's got to be, we need them to step in with the same attitude all the time. And that needs to just happen time and time again. And what starts to happen then is all of a sudden the outcome almost becomes irrelevant for them during the process. What ends up happening is they end up learning to do their best, and then the outcome is what it is.
Marto, speaking about resilience, it's a huge thing and it's something you're very passionate about. You've worked with lots of fantastic female athletes, Grand Slam champions, world number ones. Can you give us a situation with one of those players that you might be able to share where there was that moment of resilience so we can see that as sort of an illustrated example?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll take Casey, for example. I started with Casey when she jumped on board with Tennis Fitness. I think she was maybe 18 or 19. And look, she had some stuff going on, some personal things, and it was basically just trying to be some kind of a support mechanism. And when you're trying to, come from a place where you're trying to establish trust, you have to be quite delicate. And obviously, being a male and dealing with a female athlete, there's you have to be careful the way you handle things. Obviously, I won't go into Casey's personal issues, and I don't know in detail what they were, but I can tell you that over time, just by letting her deal with things herself and not pushing any of our views and opinions on her, and just letting her, I guess, mature and understand that there's people that are here for you and accept you and your situations, and no matter what you do. So looking at the person before the player. So whether with a player, it's like, I know there's a lot of female players have a lot of pressure about a lot of time it's about their court movement, and coaches will often say, it's because you're too heavy, like you need to lose weight. And
so it's like Davenport, right? They hammered Davenport over that.
Yeah, and look, I'd never really approach it like that myself. It's all about trying to make the player aware of it, a situation themselves. If I did feel it was a weight-related issue, it would be something that you'd need to try and explore yourself. So it wouldn't be something that I would push onto a player. It'd be something where I would sit down and have a conversation. What do you think we need to work on? Well, I think I need to get quicker. Okay, how do you think we can do that?
Yeah.
Well, I need to get fitter. Well, you're actually quite fit at the moment. Look at what you've done. Here's your results. What else? And if they said, oh, look, I think I could lose some weight. But what do you think you're not doing well in that area to lose the weight? So it wouldn't be so much attached to how they look. It's more about how they feel and how it's going to make them perform on court. Because there's no point attaching how someone looks and what they weigh, actually how they're playing, because then all of a sudden they get this negative stigma with how they look, and it just becomes a problem for them then.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And that was something really public for Case, wasn't it? That was, the press was tough.
Yeah.
Like people just kind of, they got in, a lot of young athletes they've got into Davenport, they got into Case. I mean, they'll literally get into anyone that doesn't look like a triathlete when it comes to being a female athlete. It's sort of the go-to thing. And talking about resilience, how did the team support Case through some of that tough stuff and get to where she became a Grand Slam champion and number 26 in the world as a singles player?
That's a great question, Sarah, because I remember the key sort of, I guess, point that you're mentioning about the feedback that she got from a male coach, and it was totally unnecessary. It wasn't needed. And Casey was playing good tennis at the time, and she was working hard with on-court and off-court. And, something like that really can derail anybody in the public when you're in the public spotlight like that. And it's just, it was quite sad that it actually happened. But anyway, look, I can sort of vaguely remember at the time, I think Giselle was working with Casey through that period, and Casey had some great people around her. And I think it was just more like everyone was just there for Casey to lean on. And Casey's the kind of person that I don't think she really says too much. She's not like a big person to verbalise and whinge about things. It's more like, it happened, it wasn't great. I've just got to basically get on with it. I don't think she's the kind of person that comes out in it, would come back negatively and try to attack someone. So, yeah, just having that support mechanism around her where she just felt like, she's doing everything she can, and that's what everybody would have reassured her at the time. And, you're doing everything you can. You're doing really well. Are you giving it your best? Yes, I am. We're all here for you, and just trying to start to build up that confidence again.
I mean, you got to give, what do you think, Boo? You got to give these athletes time.
I feel like what I'm hearing, Nathan, is like you've empowered her, for her to realise it in her own time, what she needed to improve, but you accepted her for who she is. And I think that is so important, because I think we keep forgetting how young some of these players are. I mean, they might be 21, they might be 25, but as we know, it could be a really young 25-year-old, and it really comes down to the support network like yourselves. I think she was very lucky to have some great people around her, and I probably have more concerns for the athletes that if it dwells on it and really affects them mentally and physically. Like you said, there's probably a stigma maybe related to how they look or feel, and they maybe look fitter and they're lighter, but they don't feel great inside about who they are. And I worry more about those sorts of athletes when it comes to the weight issue.
No, 100%. 100%, Betty. And if you look at our human DNA, like there's this thing called the negativity bias. And what that is it's basically like we are almost more wired to be negative than we are positive. Like someone can tell you 100 positive things and then you hear one negative thing, and the one negative thing has more of an impact than the 100 positive things. I mean, that's exaggerating, but, you know, a player can be doing everything well. And when you think about the players doing everything really well, but they're not getting as much positive feedback as they can be getting because we're wired to be a little bit more negative. So they're not getting from the coaches, from the S&C staff, whatever the case. And then all of a sudden something negative would happen and everything just sort of starts to snowball. So then they start to feel like, you know, there's a lot more impact from whenever a player will cop any negative criticism.
Bit of a change in pace, Nath.
Yep.
Coach's absolute biggest challenge is trying to educate parents on the connection between the movement fitness side of things and tennis. They see those two things as very separate. They just want to invest in the tennis lessons, but don't really want to invest a lot in fitness or S&C or getting a program. I find this a real big challenge with parents to find the importance behind it. How do we solve this problem?
One word, education. And it starts with the coaches because they're generally come from the strongest place of authority with the players initially. So it's the buck really starts and stops there, in my opinion. Parents are generally guided by the coach because the coach is generally the first point of contact for a parent because they're not going to try to source a tennis fitness trainer to help their child become a better tennis player. It's generally like there'll be a coach, the coaching point of contact would be the initial step. And then after that, it'll be, okay, technically they're doing well, but they need to work on their endurance or whatever. How do we make that happen? And a lot of times coaches go, well, I can do that. They just need to go and do some runs or whatever. The coaches, we find, it's funny because we find the coaches that we respect the most and the ones who have done the best with players and bringing juniors through are the ones that look at that three-pronged approach. So the technical side, the physical side, and the mental side. Yeah. And they understand the relevance and the importance and the equality of all three of them. So they don't place one any higher than the other. Yeah. And, you know, there's a coach that he's sent numerous players to me over the last couple of months. He's on the Gold Coast and he's European. And he said, for me, this is my approach. And I said, well, I totally agree. Like, that's great. And his kids are like all nationally ranked players. Mm-hmm. And they're all physical beasts. They're all emotionally strong and mentally strong, and they're great technically. Mm-hmm. And they understand that now. So as they evolve as athletes and people, they know that they need to look after those three areas. Yeah. So to any coaches and parents out there that are listening to this, you know, just do your research on it. Like, just go online. You know, if you look at what the top pros are doing, I mean, most of them have a coach and they have a trainer, or they have a base somewhere where they have, you know, their strength and conditioning trainers. And a lot of them also do stuff in the mental side of things as well. So combining those three areas together. But parents, when you get parents that think that they can do things as well, it becomes quite challenging, and all parents are different. Yeah. Once again, it's the role of the educators who are us to have our strategies for each parent, because each parent's totally different, right? But having our strategies and going up. Yeah.
There's some real challenges. And the one thing I love about your programs at Tennis Fitness, Nate, is the fact that, you can go online and get this really specific program for your age. Also, it's you're building a foundation through your programs. There's so many varieties, and I know I've actually recommended your program to so many of our Melbourne athletes. But I think it's the parents that need to go and do the research a little bit. As a coach, you can provide that education, but I think they need to sit there in their own time and actually go through and understand the importance of this, because we can't just get them better. I mean, we can get them better on court, but what they can't do physically really hampers them technically and tactically. So we need to find that connection and make sure that the parents are really on board with educating themselves as well.
Yeah. And look, I don't think there's any top juniors in the world who are just doing on-court work.
Yeah.
I'd actually be pretty confident to say out of the top 50 juniors in the world, there'd be none of them that are just doing on-court sessions.
Oh, definitely. No way.
They'd all be doing off-court work, and a big chunk of them would be doing something around, tennis mentality, or, meditation, or mindfulness.
With your programs, you've got them for all ages. You've worked with players all the way up to Martina Navratilova at the end of her career, I think winning a slam at 49, young players. When it comes to that S&C, that foundation, if parents are looking, or coaches, to know what are the really critical years in development to make sure that there is a base and they're not too late, when should they be where are the real key years for developing that?
I think they're all key years, because the body's, developing and evolving, and I think players should be starting to, if their primary focus is as a sport is on tennis, around the age of 8 years old, they should be starting to do some off-court training, and we generally encourage players to initially focus on strength, stability, and mobility. A lot of parents and coaches will be, they need to move quicker. Like, can you get them doing some agility drills? And we're generally like, nah, that's they should be getting that on court.
Yeah.
And then that comes back to what Betty was talking about before, with trying to get players to understand that they can make themselves move quicker. It's about the attitude and the mentality towards their movement. So for players being aggressive with their movement on court and moving as hard as they can, and the coach is motivating them, they're going to get that side of things on court. So strength, stability, and mobility, and that for us, when we look at the training model for players as they progress through in age, the strength and mobility pretty much is consistent all the way through, where other modalities sort of, they drop down, they come back up. Some are like specificity. As players get older, it rises up more. But strength and mobility, and flexibility, that just stays consistent. It's important the whole time. So players should be doing that the whole way through their careers. But there's no wrong time to start, but there's the ideal time to start. And the ideal time would be at the ages of 8 upwards.
Wow.
And you think if a player's 8 and they've learnt how to squat, lunge, push, pull, rotate, their body awareness is great. So they know what holding a good athletic base is and moving with a good athletic posture. And I'm not talking about them lifting weights. It's just learning the mechanics of how they should move and balancing the athlete out. And if you think by the time they're 12, they've got what we call 4 years of training experience. So if the player comes along at 12 years old and they're competing against this kid that's already had 4 years of this base foundation of knowledge, I mean, who do you think is going to develop over the next 4 years quicker?
Yeah, of course. The one with the foundation.
Yeah. So it's not about them doing extremely strenuous work and smashing. It's more of the education behind it. And a lot of times young kids don't. You've just got to get them to do certain things, and their body becomes habitual for them. Their body just creates the habit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the penny drops when they're about 12 and they go, oh, that's why I was doing all those exercises all that time. Now I understand. And the body's already adapted to the stimulus anyway.
Interesting, Nate, because we coach a lot of kids that you can see we get them really late sometimes in this country, and they're 16 and they can't even hold a really good base during, before, prior, during and post hitting. their base is really narrow, they don't have the strength, or they don't have the mechanics to move correctly or split step at the right time, because those things haven't been taught at the ideal time. So you get them at 15 or 16 and you're really working, they're pretty much 4 years behind in some ways.
Yeah. No, you're right. I've got a couple of, because I love working with young kids. I just absolutely love it. And I've got 2 young kids. You know, we've got 2 young kids ourselves. Yeah. So I just love, because they're so open, and once you've developed that trust with them, they just love coming to see you, and the parents are like, oh my God, this is the highlight for them to come here. And it's extremely motivating that, you know, I can set this kid up, and I take it so serious, because I know if I mess this up, I'm not setting this kid up on a good platform. And look, I've got some kids now that I've been training up, you know, we moved 3 years ago, and I've been training some kids up here for about 18 months. And some of them I actually think, far out, I've got to hold this kid back. They're so almost physically advanced for their age. I almost sometimes need to send them round in circles, because I've got to hold them back on their progress, because they're so diligent with what they do. And that's because I try to mentor them and get them to understand, like, you know, this is what we need you to do, and getting them to think about their idols and what do you think they did when they were your age. And so they're highly motivated, and the parents are like, oh, they do everything you tell them to do, because I invest so much into them when I'm with them. And I know that they're on track to, you know, to do well. And it's important to, some kids I have to let go, because I'm at the point in my career where I don't do as many face-to-face sessions as I used to, or nowhere near it. And I'm picky now with who I take on, because I don't need to do it for the income, because I'm doing other things now. I do it because I generally can see the passion there, and that motivates me. And just simply saying to kids, look, if you come back and see me next time and you don't tick these areas off, you know, I can't keep seeing you, because you're wasting your parents' money, you're wasting your time, and we're not on track. We're not on track, and that's not a bad thing. It just means I'm not the right trainer for you. That's all it is.
Accountability as well.
Because that's my expectation. Yeah. And I've let 3 kids go, and the parents have been, mate, I really appreciate you doing that, because it gave them a bit of a kick up the butt and made the parents and the player realise, do I really want to go and be a pro? Like, we were talking before about, you know, building resilience and all these things. Well, if a player wants to be a pro, we need to expose them to, even if they're 12 years old, you don't have to train like a pro, because they're not an adult, but there's still some things, levels of dedication that they need to possess and maintain, that are showing us that they're on track. So if the problem is these kids aren't exposed and having those conversations enough. So they got this expectation that they want to reach this certain point, but we're not exposing them enough to the situations they need to be in to get them there. And then all of a sudden they just keep failing at everything, because everyone's, I wouldn't say everyone's soft on them, but we're not exposing them enough. We're not challenging them enough, and we're not keeping them accountable enough. And we're not having the conversation where, mate, you don't do this again. If this doesn't happen, I can't keep training you. And this is the reason why. And
it's about that dollar in the pocket, Marto. It's a lot of times about that dollar in the pocket.
And look, I get
a lot
of
people out there that do that, though. That's the thing. There's not a lot of people that are as passionate and as genuine as you. You're seeing the bigger picture for this kid, and you're taking on this massive responsibility, because we do, as coaches, we have a responsibility to do the best job we can and be as informed as we can when we take these kids on, because their parents are investing a lot of money. The kids coming to you wanting to get better, or hopefully, and we have a responsibility to do that. So that's awesome. Oh, I love it. This has been a really good, I think it's going to be a great eye-opener for a lot of parents, because there's so many key messages in what we've spoken about today, Nate.
Betty and I have known you both for years. You've done an amazing job with so many different people, and there's so many opportunities for people to learn from you through the Tennis Fitness platform, doing it all online, comprehensive programs. Congrats on all your success and all the growth and all the different avenues you're going through now. Thanks for your support and jumping online with us. And if anyone wants to know more about what you can do with Tennis Fitness, Nathan and Giselle, it's tennisfitness.com. Everything's there. if you're as excited as me, you'll be buying the programs tomorrow and you'll be getting stuck into it. So we appreciate you.
Thanks,
Nathan.
guys, and congratulations on setting up this platform too. I think it's going to empower a lot of people, and you know, sharing knowledge is really what life's about. So I take my hat off to you guys. Well done. I wish you all the best with it.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks for your time.
All good.